So the purpose of this video is going to be to introduce the science section of the ACT to you. If you're looking for a place to get started in your studying and you don't really know where to begin, but you feel overwhelmed with not only the time constraint that science can provide, but also with the content and the strategy that goes into the section, then let this video be a good launching point for you to start to realize all of the different strategies that you can employ to increase your science performance, as well as some ways to cut down on the time that's required of you for each question. So in this video, we're going to talk about the holistic strategy to approaching the science test. We're only going to work through one passage in this video. I'll continue to make more videos where we continue to work through different types of passages and questions. But for this one specifically, it's just going to be our introductory video. We're going to introduce the strategy to the science test with you here, as well as we're going to give you kind of a general approach to each of the passages. So let's go ahead and get started. The hardest part to science is managing the time. The time is a big cruncher for us. Notice that you have 35 minutes to answer 40 questions. But think about it on a per passage basis because it gets overwhelmed if you think about I have to answer a question basically in less than a minute. So in the science test, you're going to have 6 passages. So if you break this out, if you say, okay, well, how much time do I have per passage? You're going to have about 5 minutes and 45 seconds per passage. So as you guys are taking practice tests, this needs to be kind of your guide. If you want to finish in time at the end of the test, you need to kind of pace yourself at a 5 minute and 45 second mark in each passage. Obviously, some will be lower and some will be higher, but we need to average that on the test. The second part to this is the passages, all 6 of them. 5 of them are going to look like this that I have here on the screen. They're going to have some image for you to look at. It might be a figure like you see here. Some of them may be tables like you see down there. Some of them might be different types of charts like with weird lines going all over the place. It's basically going to be some type of image that is meant to confuse you, that looks really confusing on the surface, but hopefully with the strategies we're going to teach you guys, it's just not as hard as it may initially look. So aside from that, another one of the big strategies, things that can help you as you approach the passages, is to know that question 1 on the science test, question 1 is going to be the easiest. Then question 7 down here is going to be the hardest. These strategies will repeat throughout the test. So, this ranking of questions from easiest to hardest will repeat itself per passage. So on the next passage, once you start that at question number 8 will be the easiest for that passage, and then the last question in that passage will be difficult, and then it'll repeat again for the third, and so on, so on. So the first question is always the easiest, the last question is the hardest. So for timing purposes, if you're spending a lot of time on the first question, you're doing something wrong, versus the last question, if you're spending a lot of time on it, you definitely may want to consider just marking an answer for now, star it. If you have time at the end of the test, come back to it. If you don't, it's okay. We don't want to risk sacrificing some of the first questions in each passage just because you get hung up on the hardest question in one of the passages. We don't want that. So try for about 30 seconds. If you're not really close to figuring it out, skip that question. Hopefully come back to it at the end if there's time so that you can address that question later on. So aside from that, the biggest strategy on the science is we do not want you to read the text unless you absolutely have to. Do not read text unless you have to. And then even if you do have to, we want you to be able to targeted read. We never want you to try to read for comprehension. That is confusing. It's going to create a world where you're going to start to feel a little anxiety because it's going to have a lot of these really fancy science words, things that are going to be meant to throw you off, to confuse you. And that's kind of one of the big misconceptions about science is you don't have to understand anything about the passage itself or the science behind it. Sure, it'll make it easier if you do, but you don't have to. We've had kids that we've worked with get 36s on the science test that aren't the greatest science students, but they understand the strategy. They try not to read when they don't have to, and they're able to answer all the questions because for most of the questions, maybe 33 out of the, for maybe about 38 out of the 40 questions, all of the context you need to address those questions is here. Occasionally, you're going to have a prior knowledge question, one, maybe two per test. It's not a lot. So you should be able to get the bulk of the questions right just by looking at the information provided in the passage. So the biggest strategy we can tell you is do not read the text unless you have to. And when you do have to read, we want you to targeted read for certain words and then fill in the gaps. So hopefully we'll encounter one of those questions on this passage so that I can show you what I mean by that. So let's go ahead and get started here. We are going to start at obviously number one, work our way through the test. I'm sorry if it's a bit small. I don't want you to be squinting, but I also am trying to get as much text as I can in one screen so I don't have to continue to go up and down. That would be pretty irritating. So let's start at number one. It says, in which of studies 1 and 2 did some of the fruit flies live for more than 75 days, and what diet were those fruit flies fed? So we're talking about the fruit flies living in studies 1 and 2. Well, you can see study 1 is here, and you can see study 2 is here. So we have in study 1, we have, you can see the percent alive on the y-axis, and you can see the number of days over here. So if we look down here at the percent alive at day 75, we don't have anything alive down there. So currently there's nothing alive in study 1, so we know that study 1 is not going to be an option. Study 2 is. You can tell right here that something is alive in study 2. And so the question asks, study 2 is at 5% or 15% SY medium. This is going to be something that's in the key for us. So we're going to go check out the key. And you guys can tell right here, we have 15% SY medium in study 1, and we have 5% SY medium tested in study 2. So this is C. Study 2, 5% SY medium. So number 1 was pretty easy. We didn't have to read anything, and we are definitely excited about that. So let's go to number 2. During studies 1 and 2, why did the size of the fruit fly population in each tube decrease rather than increase? So F, the birth rate was 0 because the initial population contained only males. The birth rate was 0 because the initial population contained only virgin females. H, the death rate was 0 because the initial population contained only males. Or J, the death rate was 0 because the initial population contained only virgin females. So if the fruit fly population in each tube is decreasing rather than increasing, that means that the birth rate has to be equal to 0. If the death rate was something else, then we would have a population going up. So since the birth rate is 0, we now can figure out all of F and G say the exact same thing. We can see that the only difference is it's talking about males in F and it's talking about virgin females in G. So this is a targeted read. We're not going to read all of that fancy stuff, but we do have to read because none of these pictures tell us anything about males versus females. So let's go up here and let's confirm that it's talking about males or females. We're only skimming the text, trying to identify what it is saying. So if you skim study 1, you'll see quickly here, we have 200 virgin female strain-N fruit flies. And if we're talking about study 2, it looks like we're just going to confirm that here as well, that it was virgin females in both studies. So we know that our answer is going to be G. We did not read, we did not comprehend, we are not confused because we only targeted red for virgin females. Let's keep it going. Number 3, study 1 differed from study 2 in which of the following ways? So A says female fruit flies were tested in study 1, whereas males were tested in study 2. Well, we know that's not true. We just said that females are tested in both studies. So B is going to say the same thing, but opposite. So we know that males were not studied at any point in our experiment. So it's got to be C or D. C says the SY medium tested in study 1 contained a lower percent of sugar than the SY medium tested in study 2, or D, the SY medium tested in study 1 contained a higher percent of sugar than the SY medium tested in study 2. So note in the key here, we have key in both. The keys say that in study 1, we have a 15% SY medium, and study 2 says 5%. So our answer here is going to be D. Study 1 contained a higher percent of sugar than the SY medium tested in study 2. We're really excited about this, guys. We barely had to read anything, and we're halfway through this passage, basically. So let's hope that that trend continues. Let's go to number 4. Suppose an additional trial in study 3 had been performed using a 12% SY medium. That's a diet with 12% sugar and 12% killed yeast. The average lifespan of the strain X fruit flies in this trial would most likely have been. So a couple of things here. This has a lot of numbers, so let's make sure we straighten these out. It's 12% SY medium. It's talking about study 3, and this is a diet specifically with 12% sugar and 12% killed yeast. And we want to know, what is the average lifespan of strain X fruit flies? So strain X is over here. And we saw that the SY medium said that we had 12% sugar and 12% killed yeast. Well, 12% sugar would fall in between 10 and 15. 12% killed yeast would fall in between 10 and 15. And so that tells us our average lifespan, which is this far right column, the average lifespan would be between 58.6 and 55.6. And that aligns best to answer choice G. So we know that that is going to be our final answer. Again, we didn't have to read anything, and we are halfway through. All we've had to do is find if it was talking about males or females in this passage. It's great, and we're down to 4 questions here. We've got all 4 of these right, so let's keep it going and hope that that momentum keeps coming. Number 5, the researchers predicted that decreasing a fruit fly's ability to detect odor would increase its lifespan. Are the results of study 3 consistent with this prediction? Unfortunately, this is one we're going to have to read. I don't know which one of these it is. Study 3, we don't know strain X or strain N, which one can smell or not, so we're going to have to read. But we're going to start wherever we see strain X or strain N. So it looks like it opens up and says, strain N fruit flies were modified to produce strain X. Strain X fruit flies lack OR83B, a protein required to detect a wide range of odors. Therefore, they cannot detect many odors. So we know that strain X is the one that cannot smell. So when you guys see questions like this, I always want you to break it apart. If you have a no option and a yes option, I want you guys to make sure that you address the no option first or the yes option first. Do not try to do this all at once. It's overwhelming. It's meant to confuse you because there's going to be a lot of contradiction that's going on in the explanations. So it's first to best address the yes or no part. So let's read our question again. The researchers predicted that decreasing a fruit fly's ability to detect odor would increase its lifespan. So we know now that strain X cannot smell. So we ask ourselves, yes or no, is strain X living longer on average than strain N? And it looks like it is. Strain N is between 50 and 41 days. Strain X is between 61 and 55 days. So it's definitely living longer. So if the researchers predicted that decreasing their ability to detect odor would increase its lifespan, then study 3 is consistent with that. So we know that the answer cannot be A or B. And now all we have to do is find the best explanation for answer choices, for the yes answer choices. So let's check out C. It says, yes, for each SY medium tested, the average lifespan of strain X was longer than the average lifespan of strain N. So that looks to be true. Under every scenario, it is longer than strain N. So I think we're going to go with C here. Let's just confirm. D says, for each SY medium tested, the average lifespan of strain N fruit flies was longer than the average lifespan of strain X. And that is clearly not true. So again, we had to do a little reading, which stinks, but luckily it wasn't too confusing, and we went ahead and wrote in there that strain X was the one that could not smell. So for questions like this, make sure that you compartmentalize them. Address the yes or no first, and then take care of the explanation part second. Do not try to tackle that all at once. It'll be confusing and overwhelming, and you'll get lost in the text. Keep it clean and simple. Number 6. Suppose researchers wanted to determine whether a defect in the ability to detect odor would change the lifespan of fruit flies fed 15% SY medium when live yeast is added to the diet, or when additional odors from live yeast are added to the diet. Which of the following experiments should be performed? So this is one of those questions, again, it's very similar to number 5. It looks like we have a few options. We have a study 1 and study 2 option. We have a strain X and a strain N option. We're not going to try to tackle those all at one time. It's going to be confusing. So let's address the study 1 or the study 2 part first, just because that comes up in our answer choices first. So is this study 1 or study 2? How would we even know? Well, I think our answer comes from the fact that it said that these fruit flies were fed a 15% SY medium. If they were fed a 15% SY medium, we recall that study 1 is the one that shows 15% SY medium. So you guys can see right here, 15% SY medium, that's a study 1 option. So we know that H and J are gone. And now, I think it said that we wanted to know if a defect in the ability to detect odor would change the lifespan of fruit flies. So we want to know that part. We know that which study that came from because we just did this question. It was strain X was the ones that could not smell. So our answer here is going to be F. And we can go ahead and rule out G as being an option. So it was F because study 1 was the 15% SY medium. We found that in the key, and we knew that strain X were the fruit flies that could not detect odor because it said that in the first few lines of text underneath study 3. And then lastly, number 7, this should be the hardest question. We could tell it started to get a little harder as we got on, but let's hope that we can go ahead and conquer number 7. So let's do it. The results for which 2 tubes should be compared to determine how a reduced calorie diet affects lifespan in the absence of live yeast and additional odors from live yeast. So if we are checking out number 7, we are going to have to read. We already know that. We have looked through all these graphs in the table, and unfortunately we saw nothing about tubes. So we're going to have to read, and we're going to have to figure out the key word here is absence. I bet we're not going to be lucky enough to where we could skim for the word absence up here because it's the last question. I don't think they would be nice and give us the synonym. I'm sorry, they would give us the exact word. I think we're going to have to match up kind of a synonym to absence. So I'm going to try to get all of this in one screen right here. So give me 1 second. Here we go. I think I've got close enough to it. So study 1 and study 2. So study 1 says we're going to target read for the word tubes, then pick up. It opens up with tubes, but it doesn't go into the tube 1, 2, 3, 4. So here. It's right here. It says no additional substance was added to tube 1. Well, if we read that text, that actually kind of sounds like absence. So I'm thinking that our answer is going to involve tube 1, but let's keep going. It says additional odors from live yeast were added to tube 2, and live yeast was added to tube 3. Okay. So we know that tube 2 and tube 3 are not options because we did add additional odors in tube 2 and we did add live yeast in tube 3. Those are not absence, they are included. So we know that our answer has to involve tube 1. So we can get rid of D, we can get rid of C. It looks like we can go ahead and get rid of B as well because it said that tube 2 was the one that had something added to it. So we know that that's not an option, and the only realistic one that we could be left with is A. So we're not even going to go waste the time. We don't have time to waste. We're not going to go read that because we know that tube 1 and tube 4, it has to be our answer based off of what we just read. So I hope this video found you found this video helpful. Science can be overwhelming, and it's about employing a strategy that you're most comfortable with. And when we work with students, this is the one that most of the students find to be the best, to cut down on the most reading possible while also being able to still address the questions that you have to read through a targeted reading approach. Hopefully that is the one that will help you guys move on and succeed in the science passages. We'll create another video in the next day or so about how to conquer the conflicting viewpoints passage in science. That's the one where you would have different hypotheses or different scientists, and they're all kind of advocating for their opinion on a certain topic of science. So we'll create a video for that. If you guys enjoyed this video, smash that subscribe button, give us a thumbs up. We appreciate you guys checking us out, and we hope that you'll continue to watch our videos in the future.